In the opulent Royal Lyceum Theatre, a scream shatters the elegance of a Tchaikovsky symphony. Maestro Enrico Vivaldi lies dead in the orchestra pit, poisoned, his cherished silver-tipped baton vanished. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, steps into a web of passion, greed, and betrayal. A fiery violinist with a wounded heart, a scheming manager hiding stolen fortunes, and a venomous critic with a grudge, each holds a secret. As clues unravel, cyanide in a glass, a cryptic letter, a hidden ledger, Poirot conducts a symphony of truth, revealing a murderer's desperate act to silence a devastating revelation. In 30 seconds, dive into a mystery where every note conceals a deadly motive. Chapter 1. The curtain falls. The Royal Lyceum Theatre glowed like a jewel under the London gaslights, its ornate façade a beacon for the cultured elite. Within its hallowed walls, the air thrummed with the restless energy of an audience awaiting a performance of Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 5. The auditorium, a cavern of crimson velvet and gilded plaster, buzzed with the rustle of silk gowns and the murmur of anticipation. In a private box, high above the orchestra, sat Hercule Poirot, his impeccable evening attire as precise as the notes soon to be played. His companion, Captain Hastings, fidgeted beside him, glancing at the programme. "Poirot, old chap, you're not one for the symphony, usually," Hastings remarked, his honest face creased with curiosity. "What brings you here tonight?" Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, surveyed the sea of faces below. "Mon ami, it is not the music alone that draws me. It is the study of human nature. In a theatre, all passions are laid bare: ambition, jealousy, love, and tonight I sense something discordant." His moustache twitched, a sure sign of his little grey cells at work. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. The orchestra, a disciplined army of black-clad musicians, tuned their instruments in a chaotic prelude that promised harmony. Maestro Enrico Vivaldi, a figure of near-mythic renown, strode to the conductor's podium, his silver-tipped baton gleaming under the spotlight. His presence was commanding, his dark hair streaked with grey, his eyes burning with the fire of genius. He raised the baton, and the first notes of Tchaikovsky's symphony soared, filling the theatre with a tide of sound. Poirot leaned forward, his attention not on the music, but on the man wielding the baton. Vivaldi's movements were precise, almost hypnotic, yet there was a tension in his posture, a tightness in his jaw that suggested more than artistic fervour. Poirot's gaze flickered to the orchestra pit, where the first violinist, a woman with raven hair and a fiery intensity, played with a passion that bordered on defiance. To the side, in the wings, a man in a tailored suit, likely the theatre manager, watched with a strained smile. And in the stalls, a gaunt figure scribbled furiously in a notebook, his lips curled in a sneer. Poirot noted them all, filing each detail away. The first movement ended, and the audience erupted in applause. Vivaldi bowed stiffly, then retreated to the wings for the interval. The house lights rose, and the crowd stirred, some heading for the bar, others whispering excitedly about the performance. Poirot remained seated, his fingers steepled, lost in thought. Hastings, ever restless, suggested a glass of sherry, but Poirot waved him off. "No, Hastings, I wish to observe. There is a rhythm here, a pattern, and I must understand it." Before Hastings could protest, a piercing scream shattered the hum of conversation. It came from the orchestra pit. The audience froze, then surged forward, craning their necks. Poirot was already on his feet, his small frame moving with surprising agility as he descended the grand staircase to the auditorium floor. Hastings trailed behind, muttering about confounded interruptions. In the pit, chaos reigned. Musicians stood in disarray, their instruments forgotten. At the center, sprawled across the floor near the conductor's podium, lay Maestro Vivaldi, his eyes wide and unseeing, his face twisted in a rictus of pain. A violinist, the same raven-haired woman Poirot had noticed, knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she called his name. A stagehand shouted for a doctor, but Poirot, kneeling beside the body, knew it was futile. The faint, bitter scent of almonds hung in the air, cyanide, unmistakable to one of Poirot's experience. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his gloved fingers hovering over Vivaldi's lifeless form. He noted the absence of the silver-tipped baton which had been in Vivaldi's hand moments before the interval. The podium was bare, the floor around it littered with scattered music sheets, but no sign of the precious heirloom. "This is no accident," Poirot said softly, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. Inspector Japp arrived, his broad face flushed from the sprint across London. "Poirot, you're here, of course," he said, half exasperated, half relieved. "What's this mess, then?" "A murder, Inspector," Poirot replied, rising to his feet. "Poison, I suspect, and a curious detail. The maestro's baton is missing. It is not merely a tool, but a symbol. Its absence is significative." Japp barked orders to secure the scene, his men herding musicians and stagehands away. Poirot's eyes roamed the pit, taking in the overturned music stands, the abandoned instruments, the faint scuff marks on the polished wood. He turned to Japp. "We must speak to those closest to the maestro, the violinist, the manager, and the critic in the stalls. They will hold the key to this symphony of death." As the police cordoned off the pit, Poirot stood back, his mind already weaving the threads of motive and opportunity. The theatre, once a stage for music, was now a stage for murder, and Hercule Poirot would conduct the investigation with all the precision of a maestro. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The orchestra pit of the Royal Lyceum Theatre, so recently a cradle of music, had transformed into a grim tableau of death. The air, still heavy with the lingering resonance of Tchaikovsky's symphony, now carried a faint, acrid tang that Hercule Poirot recognized at once. The body of Maestro Enrico Vivaldi lay sprawled across the polished wooden floor, his limbs askew, his face frozen in a grimace of agony that spoke of a swift and violent end. The conductor's podium, a sentinel of authority, stood sentinel no longer, its surface bare save for a few scattered sheets of music, their edges curling like wilted petals. Most conspicuous was the absence of Vivaldi's silver-tipped baton, that elegant instrument of his will, which had gleamed so proudly under the stage lights not an hour before. Poirot, his small frame poised with the alertness of a cat, surveyed the scene, with eyes that missed nothing. Inspector Japp, his broad shoulders filling the narrow entrance to the pit, was issuing orders to his constables with the brusque efficiency of a man accustomed to chaos. "Keep the crowd back, Thompson. No one touches anything until the doctor's done," he barked, his voice echoing off the curved walls of the auditorium. The audience, now a restless sea of murmurs and gasps, pressed against the velvet ropes that separated them from the tragedy below. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood at Poirot's side, his face a mixture of shock and curiosity. "Good heavens, Poirot," Hastings whispered, his eyes fixed on Vivaldi's lifeless form. "What a ghastly business! Poison, you said. But how? And why take the baton?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle signal of his mind at work. "Patience, mon ami. The how and the why, they are the notes of this dark symphony, and we must listen carefully to hear them." He turned to Japp, who was now kneeling beside the body, his notebook open. "Inspector, what does the good doctor say?" Japp glanced up, his expression grim. "Doctor, Hartley's just arrived. Says it's likely cyanide. Smells unmistakable, and the way the poor chap's face is set. Quick, too. Probably dead within minutes. No signs of a struggle, though, which is odd. You'd think a man like Vivaldi would have fought." Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the maestro's hands, which lay open, fingers slightly curled, as if still grasping the phantom baton. "And the baton, Inspector?" "It was in his hand before the interval." "Oui? A silver-tipped heirloom, I understand, passed down through generations of Vivaldi's family. Its absence is not an accident." Japp scratched his head, his pencil hovering over his notebook. "Right you are, Poirot. I've got men searching the pit and the wings, but it's not turned up yet. Could be a thief, maybe. Someone saw a chance in the chaos." Poirot's eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. "No, none, Inspector. A thief does not poison a man to steal a baton, no matter its value. The theft is a message, or perhaps a mask. We must look deeper." He stepped carefully around the body, his polished shoes avoiding the scattered sheets of music. The pit was a confined space, its walls lined with black velvet to muffle sound, its floor a mosaic of scuff marks and rosin dust from countless performances. The musicians' chairs were arranged in a tight semicircle, their music stands tilted at odd angles, as if the orchestra had fled in haste. Poirot paused beside a stand, bearing the score for Tchaikovsky's symphony, its pages marked with Vivaldi's precise annotations. He bent closer, noting a faint smudge of ink on the margin. A detail, perhaps, but one he filed away. "Inspector," Poirot said, straightening, "we must know the movements of all who had access to this pit during the interval. The poison, it was administered swiftly, and the baton was taken with purpose. Who was here when the maestro fell?" Japp flipped through his notebook. "Right. Well, the interval was called at 8:45 p.m. Vivaldi left the podium and went to the wings, according to the stage manager. Most of the orchestra headed to the green room or the bar for a quick drink. We've got 3 main suspects so far, based on who was closest to Vivaldi. First, there's Maria Bellini, the first violinist. Fiery lass, had a public row with Vivaldi last week over her phrasing. She was seen lingering near the pit just before the scream. Then there's Harold Grayson, the theatre manager. Shifty sort, if you ask me. Always smiling, but it doesn't reach his eyes. He was backstage, claims he was checking props. And finally, Percival Wren, that critic who's been tearing Vivaldi apart in the papers. He was in the audience, but an usher says he slipped out during the interval, heading toward the stage door. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. A violinist, a manager, and a critic. A trio most intriguing, each with a motive, perhaps, but motive alone does not make a murderer. We must examine the opportunity and the means. He turned to the pit's edge, where a narrow staircase led to the wings. Let us see where the maestro went before his final performance. The wings were a labyrinth of ropes, pulleys, and stacked scenery flats, dimly lit by flickering gas lamps. A stagehand, a wiry man with nervous eyes, stood guard over a small table where Vivaldi's water glass still sat, its contents half spilled. Poirot examined the glass without touching it, noting a faint residue on its rim. This, Inspector, must be tested. If it is the vessel of the poison, it will tell us much. Japp nodded, signaling a constable to bag the glass. You think someone slipped cyanide into his water? Bold move, doing it in the middle of a performance. Bold, yes, but precise, Poirot replied. The interval is a time of distraction. Musicians moving, audience chattering, stagehands bustling. A perfect moment for a silent act of murder. He stepped back into the pit, his eyes scanning the floor. Near the base of the podium, he spotted a small, crumpled piece of paper, half hidden beneath a cello stand. With a handkerchief, he retrieved it, unfolding it carefully. It was a fragment of a letter, written in Vivaldi's elegant hand, the ink still fresh. I cannot remain silent. The truth must be known, though it may cost me. The rest was torn away. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This, mon ami, is a clue of the first importance. The maestro was preparing to reveal something dangerous. Perhaps this is why he was silenced. Hastings, who had been hovering anxiously, peered over Poirot's shoulder. Good Lord, Poirot, you think he was killed to keep him quiet? But about what? That, Hastings, we shall discover. But first, we must speak to the suspects. Their words, their gestures, they will betray the truth. Poirot tucked the fragment into his pocket, his mind already assembling the pieces of the puzzle. Japp led the way to the green room, where the three suspects waited under the watchful eye of a constable. Maria Bellini sat apart, her violin case clutched like a shield, her dark eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Harold Grayson stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, his smile fixed like a mask. Percival Wren lounged in an armchair, a glass of brandy in one hand, his notebook in the other, his expression one of disdainful amusement. The air was thick with tension, each suspect a note in the discordant melody Poirot sought to resolve. He began with Maria, his tone gentle, but probing. Mademoiselle Bellini, you were close to the maestro, both in the pit and in spirit, PIMI. Tell me, where were you during the interval? Maria's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. I was practicing in the rehearsal room, alone. I needed to perfect a passage Vivaldi criticized. Her eyes flashed. He was relentless, always pushing me to be better. But I didn't kill him. I respected him, despite everything. Poirot noted the sincerity in her voice, but also the strength in her hands capable of precise, deadly work. And the baton. You saw it in his hand before the interval, oui? Yes, she said. It was always in his hand. I didn't see it after he fell. Poirot nodded, turning to Grayson, whose smile faltered under his gaze. Monsieur Grayson, as manager, you had access to the pit, did you not? Where were you when the maestro took his final breath? Grayson's eyes darted to the side. I was checking the props in the wings. The interval is a busy time, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't see anything unusual. His voice was smooth, but Poirot detected a tremor beneath the polish. And the baton? Poirot pressed. A valuable item, yet it vanishes in a moment of chaos. Curious, non? Grayson shrugged. Perhaps a stagehand took it. They're always pilfering things. Poirot's gaze lingered, then shifted to Wren, who smirked over his brandy. Monsieur Wren, your reviews of Maestro Vivaldi were less than kind. Some might say they were motive enough, for murder. Wren laughed, a harsh, grating sound. If I killed every conductor I disliked, the stages of London would be empty. I was in my seat, watching the rabble. I saw nothing of the baton or the murder. Yet you left your seat during the interval, Poirot said softly. An usher saw you near the stage door. Wren's smirk faded. I needed air. The theatre was stifling. Is that a crime? Poirot smiled, his eyes cold. Not yet, monsieur. Not yet. As Japp escorted the suspects out, Poirot stood alone in the green room, his mind racing. The poison, the baton, the letter fragment. They were threads in a tapestry of deceit. The murderer was among them, hidden behind a mask of innocence. But Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, would unravel the truth, note by note, until the silent symphony sang its final chord. Chapter 3. The Violinist's Temper. The rehearsal room of the Royal Lyceum Theatre was a stark contrast to the opulent auditorium, its walls bare, save for a few faded posters of past performances and a cracked mirror reflecting the dim glow of a single gas lamp. The air smelled of rosin and old wood, a testament to countless hours of the practice that had shaped the orchestra's sound. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small, immaculate figure a study in composure amid the lingering tension of murder. Beside him, Captain Hastings shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the door where a constable stood guard. At the far end of the room, Maria Bellini, the first violinist, sat on a wooden chair, her Stradivarius resting on a velvet-lined case beside her. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, accentuating the sharp lines of her face, and her eyes, though red from recent tears, burned with a defiance that intrigued Poirot. Inspector Japp had reluctantly allowed Poirot to conduct the first interviews, his trust in the little Belgian tempered by years of successful collaboration. "Mind you, Poirot," Japp had muttered as they entered, "don't let that violinist's pretty face fool you. She's got a temper like a storm, and Vivaldi bore the brunt of it more than once." Poirot's moustache twitched as he regarded Maria. "Mademoiselle Bellini," he began, his voice soft but carrying the weight of authority. "You are a woman of passion, n'est-ce pas? Your music, it speaks of fire, of intensity. But such passion can lead to discord. Tell me, what was your relationship with Maestro Vivaldi?" Maria's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair, her knuckles whitening. "He was a genius," she said, her voice low but steady. "A tyrant, yes, but a genius. He demanded perfection, and I gave it to him. Every note, every phrase, but he could be cruel. Last week, during rehearsal, he stopped the orchestra and called my vibrato sloppy. Sloppy!" Her eyes flashed, and she leaned forward, her voice rising. "I, who have played for kings, who trained under Paganini's own pupil. He humiliated me before the entire orchestra." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And this humiliation, it wounded you deeply, oui? Enough to wish him harm?" Maria's gaze faltered, and she looked away, her hands trembling slightly. "I was angry, yes. I shouted at him, told him he was unfair. But wish him dead? Number I needed him. He pushed me to be better, even when I hated him for it." Her voice broke, and she brushed a tear from her cheek, her defiance giving way to a flicker of vulnerability. Hastings, ever the gentleman, offered his handkerchief, which Maria accepted with a curt nod. Poirot, however, remained focused, his eyes noting the precise way she folded the handkerchief, the controlled movements of her hands, hands trained to wield a bow with surgical precision. "Mademoiselle," he continued, "during the interval, you say you were here, practicing alone. A curious choice, non? Most musicians, they seek rest, a glass of wine, the company of others. Why did you remain?" Maria's eyes met his, steady now. "I told you, he criticized my vibrato. I couldn't let it stand. I stayed to practice the passage from Tchaikovsky's second movement, the one he said was lacking. I wanted to prove him wrong." She gestured to her violin. "You can ask the stagehands. They heard me playing." Poirot tilted his head, considering. "And the baton, mademoiselle, the maestro's silver-tipped baton, so precious to him. You saw it in his hand before the interval, oui? Did you see it after?" Maria shook her head, her brow furrowing. "Number. He always held it, even during breaks. It was part of him, like an extension of his arm. I didn't see it after he was found." Her voice faltered, and she looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of her violin case. Poirot stepped closer, his voice gentle but probing. "You are skilled, mademoiselle, with hands that move with great dexterity. To take a baton, to slip it away in a moment of distraction. It would be a simple matter for one such as you, non?" Maria's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "Are you accusing me, Monsieur Poirot? I loved music as much as he did. I would never—" She stopped, her breath catching, and Poirot noted the genuine outrage in her tone, though he filed it away with the same care as her earlier grief. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle," he said soothingly. "I accuse no one. Yet. I seek only the truth. And the truth, it hides in the details." He turned to the room, his eyes scanning the scuffed floor, the scattered sheets of music on a nearby table, the faint scratches on the wall where a music stand had been carelessly dragged. "Tell me, did you see anyone near the pit during the interval? Anyone who should not have been there?" Maria hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, then closing again. I was focused on my practice, but I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy ones, not like the musicians. I thought it was a stagehand, perhaps, or—" She trailed off, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Or," Poirot prompted, his tone sharp now. "Or Mr. Grayson," she said reluctantly. "He's always lurking about, checking things, giving orders. I didn't see him, but I know his walk. Quick, like he's always in a hurry." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." He turned to Hastings, who was scribbling notes in his pocketbook, his brow furrowed with concentration. "Hastings, mon ami, make a note of this. The footsteps, they are significant. We must verify who was in this corridor." As Maria rose to leave, her violin case in hand, Poirot stopped her with a raised hand. "One final question, mademoiselle. Did Maestro Vivaldi ever speak to you of a secret, something he wished to reveal? A matter of grave importance?" Maria's face paled, and for a moment Poirot thought she might deny it, but then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "He mentioned something last week, after rehearsal. He said he'd discovered a betrayal in the theatre, something that would shake the foundations. I thought he was being dramatic, as he often was. He didn't say more." She paused, her eyes searching Poirot's. "Do you think that's why he was killed?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mademoiselle. Perhaps. You may go, but remain in the theatre. The truth, it is not yet fully played." As Maria departed, her footsteps echoing in the corridor, Hastings turned to Poirot, his expression one of exasperation. "Good Lord, Poirot, she's a bundle of nerves, but she doesn't strike me as a murderer. That temper, though, do you think she could have done it in a fit of rage? Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his expression thoughtful. Rage, Hastings, is a powerful motive, but it is not precise. Poison, it requires planning, calculation. Mademoiselle Bellini has the passion, oui, but does she have the coldness of heart? That we must discover. He paused, his eyes narrowing. The footsteps she heard. They suggest another presence, one that moves with purpose. We must speak to Grayson next, and then the critic, Wren. Each note in this symphony must be examined. Japp, who had been conferring with the constable at the door, rejoined them, his face set in a scowl. Poirot, I've got men searching the theatre for that blasted baton. Nothing yet, and the doctors confirmed it. Cyanide in the water glass. Whoever did this knew Vivaldi's habits. He always drank from that glass during the interval. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The glass, the baton, the footsteps, the betrayal. All are pieces of the puzzle. But the picture, it is not yet clear. Come, Hastings, let us prepare for the next movement. The manager, Monsieur Grayson, awaits, and I suspect his smile hides more than he wishes us to know. As they left the rehearsal room, the faint strains of a violin echoed from somewhere deep in the theatre, a mournful sound that seemed to carry the weight of Maria Bellini's grief, and perhaps her secrets. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, weaving the threads of evidence into a pattern that would, in time, reveal the murderer's hand. Chapter 4. The Manager's Façade. The manager's office at the Royal Lyceum Theatre was a sanctuary of order amidst the chaos of the stage, its walls adorned with vibrant posters of past productions, each framed in polished mahogany. A heavy oak desk dominated the room, its surface cluttered with ledgers, ticket stubs, and a silver inkstand that gleamed in the soft light of a green-shaded lamp. Harold Grayson, the theatre manager, stood behind the desk, his tailored suit impeccable, his smile as polished as the inkstand, but far less genuine. To Hercule Poirot, who stood before him with Captain Hastings at his side, that smile was a mask, and masks, he knew, were worn to conceal. Inspector Japp had remained in the auditorium, overseeing the constables as they combed the orchestra pit for further clues, leaving Poirot to conduct this interview with his characteristic finesse. Hastings, clutching his notebook, eyed Grayson warily, sensing the man's unease despite his outward composure. Poirot, his hands clasped behind his back, surveyed the office with a keen eye, noting the meticulous arrangement of papers, the locked filing cabinet in the corner, and the faint scent of cigar smoke that lingered in the air. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot began, his voice smooth as velvet, "you are the guardian of this theatre, oui? The man who ensures the lights burn, the curtains rise, and the music plays. A position of great responsibility, and yet I sense one of great strain." Grayson's smile widened, but his eyes flickered, betraying a moment of disquiet. "It's a demanding role, Monsieur Poirot," he replied, his tone as smooth as Poirot's, but lacking its warmth. "The Lyceum is a jewel of London's cultural crown, but it requires constant care. Maestro Vivaldi, God rest him, was a genius. But his demands, new instruments, renovated pits, extravagant sets, they stretched our resources thin." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his interest. "Resources, monsieur? You speak of money, I presume. The lifeblood of any theatre. Tell me, how did you manage these demands of the maestro?" Grayson gestured to the ledgers on his desk, his hands moving with practiced ease. "Careful budgeting, Of course. I balanced the books, negotiated with patrons, secured sponsorships. It's a delicate dance, but I've kept the Lyceum afloat for years." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes fixed on Grayson's. And yet, a man such as Maestro Vivaldi, he was not easily satisfied, no? I have heard whispers of disagreements between you. Disagreements over funds, perhaps? Grayson's smile faltered, and he adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous gesture Poirot noted at once. Vivaldi was passionate, he admitted. He wanted the best for the orchestra, and sometimes he didn't understand the financial realities. We had words, yes, but nothing serious. All part of running a theatre. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let us turn to the night of the tragedy. During the interval, you say you were in the wings, checking props. A curious task for a manager, no? Most would delegate such work to stagehands." Grayson's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I'm hands-on, Monsieur Poirot. The props for the second act needed inspection. Vivaldi was particular about the staging. I was there, ensuring everything was in order." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "no one saw you in the wings at that precise moment. The stagehands, they were elsewhere, the musicians in the green room or the bar. Your presence, it is unconfirmed." Grayson's eyes narrowed, and for a moment the mask slipped, revealing a flash of irritation. "Are you suggesting I'm lying? I was where I said I was. Ask anyone who passed through the wings." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture conciliatory, but his eyes sharp. "I suggest nothing, monsieur. I seek only clarity. The maestro, he was poisoned, and his baton, his cherished baton, has vanished. You, as manager, had access to the pit, to his water glass, to every corner of this theatre. And you were, perhaps, near the pit when Mademoiselle Bellini heard footsteps. Way?" Grayson's face paled, but he recovered quickly, his smile returning like a curtain drawn across a stage. "Footsteps? The theatre is full of them during an interval. Stagehands, musicians, even critics sneaking about. As for the baton, it's probably in the hands of some opportunistic thief. The pit was chaos after Vivaldi fell. Anyone could have taken it." Poirot's gaze drifted to the desk, where a ledger lay open, its pages filled with neat columns of figures. "Your accounts, Monsieur Grayson. They are meticulous, I'm sure. And yet I wonder, did Maestro Vivaldi ever question them? Did he, perhaps, suspect that not all was as it seemed?" Grayson's hand froze on the edge of the desk, and Hastings, ever observant of such details, scribbled furiously in his notebook. "Vivaldi was a musician, not an accountant," Grayson said, his voice tight. "He trusted me to handle the finances. If he had concerns, he never voiced them to me." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, monsieur, he voiced them to someone else. A letter, half-written, was found near his body, a letter speaking of a grave injustice. Does this mean anything to you?" Grayson's eyes widened, but he shook his head. "Nothing. Vivaldi was dramatic, always writing florid letters about this or that. It could mean anything, or nothing at all." Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped once more. "Merci, Monsieur Grayson. You have been most cooperative. But I must ask you to remain in the theatre. The truth, it has a way of revealing itself, like a melody that cannot be silenced." As Grayson nodded curtly and turned to his ledgers, Poirot led Hastings out of the office, his mind already turning to the next suspect. In the corridor, Hastings whispered, "Poirot, that chap's as slippery as an eel. Did you see how he reacted when you mentioned the letter? He knows something, I'd wager." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Indeed, mon ami. Monsieur Grayson's smile is a façade, and behind it lies a man under pressure. The footsteps heard by Mademoiselle Bellini, the missing baton, the letter. They all point to a secret, one that Vivaldi may have uncovered. We must examine the finances of this theatre, Hastings. Money. It is often the root of murder. They descended to the auditorium, where Japp was waiting, his face a mixture of frustration and determination. "No luck on the baton, Poirot," he said. "We've searched the pit, the wings, even the dressing rooms. It's vanished into thin air." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Not into thin air, Inspector. It is hidden, and the one who hides it seeks to mislead us. But Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived. Let us prepare to meet Monsieur Rennes, the critic. His pen is sharp, but his secrets, I suspect, are sharper still." As they moved toward the theatre's bar, where Percival Wren awaited, the faint echo of a violin drifted through the corridors, a reminder of the passion and pain that permeated the Lyceum. Poirot's little grey cells hummed, piecing together the notes of a symphony that was far from complete. Chapter 5. The critic's venom, the bar of the Royal Lyceum Theatre, was a haven of polished brass and dim amber light, its shelves lined with bottles that gleamed like jewels against the mirrored backdrop. The air carried the faint tang of spirits and the murmur of hushed conversations, though tonight the usual post-performance chatter was replaced by the uneasy whispers of a crowd still reeling from murder. Hercule Poirot, his small frame moving with deliberate grace, entered the bar with Captain Hastings at his side, their footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. At a corner table, Percival Wren, the notorious critic, sat alone, his gaunt frame hunched over a glass of brandy, his pen scratching furiously across a notebook, his thin lips curled in a sneer that seemed permanently etched, as if the world itself were an affront to his refined sensibilities. Inspector Japp had joined them, his broad face set in a scowl as he muttered about the elusive baton. "Still no sign of it, Poirot," he said, keeping his voice low. "And the men are getting restless. Half the orchestra's demanding to go home, and the other half's too shaken to talk straight. This Wren fellow, though, he's a piece of work. His reviews of Vivaldi were vicious enough to curdle milk." Poirot's eyes, sharp as cut glass, fixed on Wren. "A critic, mon ami, wields a pen as deadly as any blade. Let us see if Monsieur Wren's venom extends beyond his words." He approached the table, his manner courteous but unyielding, like a fencer preparing for a duel. "Monsieur Wren, I am Hercule Poirot. May I have a moment of your time?" Wren looked up, his pale eyes narrowing as he assessed Poirot. "The famous detective," he said, his voice a dry rasp, laced with mockery. "Come to dissect my soul, have you? I warn you, it's a barren field." He gestured to the chair opposite, his long fingers stained with ink. "Sit, if you must." Poirot took the seat, his posture impeccable, while Hastings hovered nearby, his notebook at the ready. Japp stood back, his arms crossed, content to let Poirot take the lead. "Monsieur Wren," Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing, "your reputation precedes you. Your reviews of Maestro Vivaldi were, shall we say, less than flattering. You called his conducting a mockery of music, I believe. Strong words, non?" Wren's sneer widened, and he sipped his brandy, savouring it as if it were the taste of victory. "Vivaldi was a fraud," he said bluntly, "a showman masquerading as a maestro. His tempos were erratic, his interpretations pedestrian. I wrote the truth, and he couldn't bear it. He banned me from rehearsals, you know. Petty vengeance for my honesty." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle signal of his interest. "And this ban, it angered you, oui? To be excluded from the heart of the music you claim to champion, it must have stung." Rennes's eyes flashed, but his voice remained cool. "Anger? No, Monsieur Poirot. Amusement, perhaps. Vivaldi's tantrums only proved my point. His ego was larger than his talent. I didn't need to be in his rehearsals to know his work was second-rate." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Yet you were here tonight, in the audience, close to the stage. An usher saw you leave your seat during the interval, heading toward the stage door. A curious choice for a man who claims indifference." Rennes's hand paused, the pen hovering over his notebook. "I needed air," he said, his tone clipped. The auditorium was stifling, and the crowd insufferable. "I stepped out for a cigarette. Is that a crime?" "Not a crime, monsieur," Poirot replied softly. "But a coincidence. The maestro is poisoned, his baton vanishes, and you, a man with a known enmity, are seen near the scene. Tell me, where exactly did you go?" Rennes's lips thinned, and he set his pen down with deliberate care. "I went to the alley behind the theatre, smoked my cigarette, watched the stars. I was back in my seat before the scream. You can ask the usher. He saw me return." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And the baton, monsieur? The silver-tipped heirloom that Vivaldi cherished. Did you see it in the pit, or perhaps elsewhere?" Rennes laughed, a harsh, grating sound that drew glances from nearby patrons. "The baton? Probably pawned by some stagehand with sticky fingers, or maybe Vivaldi lost it in one of his fits. I wouldn't know. I don't waste my time on trinkets." Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the critic's dismissive tone, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his glass. "You are a man of observation, Monsieur Rennes. Your reviews, they dissect every note, every gesture. Surely you noticed something during the interval. Someone out of place, perhaps?" Rennes's gaze flickered, and for a moment Poirot thought he might deflect again. But then the critic leaned back, his sneer softening into something almost thoughtful. "I saw Grayson skulking about," he said. "The manager, always fussing over props or some such nonsense. He was near the pit entrance, looking agitated. More than usual, I'd say." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Agitated, you say? In what way?" Rennes shrugged, swirling his brandy. He was pacing, muttering to himself. Kept glancing at the pit, like he was expecting something. Or someone. I didn't think much of it. Grayson's always on edge. Runs a tight ship, but it's a sinking one, if you ask me." Poirot filed this away, his mind turning to the manager's nervous demeanor in their earlier encounter. "And Mademoiselle Bellini? Did you see her, perhaps, near the rehearsal room or the pit?" Rennes's sneer returned. "The violinist? Oh, she was there, sawing away at her strings like a woman possessed. I heard her from the corridor. Relentless, that one. Vivaldi's pet until he turned on her. She's got fire, I'll give her that. But it's a wonder she didn't snap her bow in half." Poirot nodded, his thoughts weaving a pattern from Rennes's words. "One final question, monsieur. Did you ever hear Maestro Vivaldi speak of a secret, something he intended to reveal? A matter of consequence?" Rennes's eyes narrowed, and he took a slow sip of brandy before answering. Vivaldi was always blustering about something. Injustices, betrayals, the usual artist's dramatics. Last month, at a gala, he cornered me and rambled about, setting things right. I thought he was drunk. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't care to listen. Poirot rose, his expression courteous, but his eyes cold. Merci, Monsieur Wren. Your candour is illuminating. Remain in the theatre, if you please. The truth, it is like a melody. It emerges in its own time. As Wren returned to his notebook, Poirot led Hastings and Japp to a quiet corner of the bar. Hastings, his face flushed with excitement, whispered, "Poirot, that man's as venomous as a snake. Did you see how he dodged your questions? And that bit about Grayson. Do you think he's trying to throw us off?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Monsieur Wren is a man of words, Hastings, and words can be both weapon and shield. He tells us much, but he conceals more. His observation of Grayson, it aligns with Mademoiselle Bellini's footsteps. We must verify his movements during the interval. The alley, the cigarette, they are too convenient, non?" Japp grunted, his notebook open. "I'll have the usher confirm Wren's story. But I don't trust him, Poirot. Those reviews of his, they're not just criticism, they're personal. He hated Vivaldi enough to do him in, if you ask me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Hatred, Inspector, is a motive, but poison requires precision, not passion. Wren's venom is in his pen, but is it in his actions? That we must discover. Let us return to the pit, mon ami. The scene of the crime. It still holds secrets, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover them." As they left the bar, the faint clink of Wren's glass echoed behind them, a solitary note in the growing symphony of suspicion. The theatre, alive with shadows and whispers, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Poirot to unravel the next thread of the mystery. Chapter 6. The Little Grey Cells, the Royal Lyceum. Theatre, its grandeur now shrouded in the sombre aftermath of murder, seemed to pulse with secrets as Hercule Poirot retired to his suite at the nearby Savoy Hotel. The hour was late, the city outside cloaked in a fog that mirrored the haze of the case. Poirot, impeccably dressed despite the hour, sat at a small mahogany table, a cup of tisane steaming before him. The room, with its velvet drapes and polished furnishings, was a haven of order, a stark contrast to the chaos of the theatre. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful companion, paced the floor, his brow furrowed with the weight of the evening's discoveries. "Poirot, this case is a devil of a puzzle," Hastings said, pausing to adjust his tie, a nervous habit. "Poison in the water glass, a missing baton, that cryptic letter fragment, it's all a jumble. And those suspects, Maria's temper, Grayson's shifty smile, Wren's venomous tongue, any one of them could have done it." Poirot sipped his tisane, his eyes half closed, but his mind, as always, was a whirl of activity. "Mon ami, a puzzle is only a jumble until the pieces are placed in their proper order. The little grey cells, they are working, arranging the notes of this dark symphony. We must consider each element, the poison, the baton, the letter, and ask not only what they mean, but why they were chosen." Hastings sank into a chair, his notebook open but untouched. "The poison, right? Cyanide," Japp said. "Quick and deadly. But how did it get into Vivaldi's glass? Someone had to know he'd drink from it during the interval. And the baton, why take it? It's valuable, sure, but it's not worth killing for, is it?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind alighting on a new thread. "The baton, Hastings, is not merely an object of value. It is a symbol of Vivaldi's authority, his legacy. Its theft is deliberate, a gesture meant to confuse or to conceal. As for the poison, cyanide is a choice of precision. It requires access, opportunity, and knowledge of the maestro's habits. We must ask, who had all three? He rose, crossing to the window, where the fog pressed against the glass like a living thing. Let us review, mon ami. Mademoiselle Bellini, the violinist. She has passion and a motive, her public humiliation by Vivaldi. Yet her grief, it seems genuine, and her skill with the violin suggests dexterity, perhaps enough to slip a baton away unnoticed. Monsieur Grayson, the manager. He is nervous, his smile a mask. His footsteps were heard, and his role gives him access to every corner of the theatre. And Monsieur Wren, the critic, his hatred for Vivaldi is clear, and his movements during the interval are imprecise. Each has a piece of the puzzle, but none fits perfectly. Yet. Hastings leaned forward, his eyes bright with curiosity. What about that letter fragment you found? A grave injustice. Sounds like Vivaldi was on to something big. Could it be about the theatre's finances? Grayson looked rattled when you mentioned it. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. The letter. It is the key, Hastings. Vivaldi was preparing to expose something that threatened someone enough to kill him. The finances, they are a possibility. Grayson's ledgers, they must be examined. But there is more. The baton's absence, it is not a theft for gain, but a distraction, or perhaps a message. We must consider where it might be hidden, and why. He moved to a small writing desk, retrieving a sheet of paper and a pen. With precise, elegant strokes, he began to list the facts, his voice low and methodical. First, the poison. Cyanide in the water glass, administered during the interval between 8:45 and 9 p.m. The glass was on a table in the wings, accessible to many, but only one who knew Vivaldi's routine would use it. Second, the baton. Silver-tipped, an heirloom, last seen in Vivaldi's hand before he left the podium. It was not in the pit, nor in the wings, nor in any obvious place. Third, the letter fragment, hinting at a betrayal or injustice. And fourth, the suspect's movements, Maria in the rehearsal room, Grayson in the wings, Wren near the stage door. Each claims solitude, yet footsteps were heard, and Wren saw Grayson near the pit. Hastings scratched his head. It's a tangle, Poirot. But if Vivaldi was about to expose something, maybe it's not just about money. Maybe it's personal, a feud, a scandal. Wren's reviews were brutal, and Maria admitted Vivaldi was like a father to her before their falling out. Could it be something deeper? Poirot's eyes gleamed, and he set down his pen. You are learning, mon ami. The human heart, it is the true stage of this crime. Passion, pride, greed. These are the motives we must explore. But we must also be practical. Tomorrow I will request from Inspector Japp the maestro's personal effects, his letters, his diary, anything that might reveal this grave injustice. And we must search for the baton, not only in the theatre, but in the minds of those who took it. It is hidden, Hastings, but not far. He paused, his gaze distant, as if hearing a melody only he could discern. There is a rhythm to this crime, a pattern. The poison, it is silent, swift. The baton, it is a flourish, a distraction. The letter, it is the motive, half-spoken. We must listen to the silences, Hastings, for they speak louder than words. Hastings yawned, the late hour catching up with him. You make it sound like a concert, Poirot. But how do we find the conductor of this mess? Poirot smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit his face. By using the little grey cells, mon ami. They are never silent. Now, to bed. Tomorrow, we return to the theatre, and I shall conduct my own symphony of truth. As Hastings retired to his room, Poirot remained at the table, his tisane cooling, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The fog outside thickened, but within, the outlines of the case were beginning to sharpen, note by note, in the meticulous mind of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 7. A Discordant Note. The morning sun pierced the fog that clung to London's streets, casting a pale light through the tall windows of the Royal Lyceum Theatre's rehearsal hall. The room, usually alive with the hum of tuning instruments and the chatter of musicians, was subdued, its occupants gathered in small, wary clusters. The murder of Maestro Enrico Vivaldi had cast a pall over the orchestra, and the air was thick with suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming, stood at the edge of the hall, his keen eyes observing the musicians as they whispered and glanced nervously toward the orchestra pit, now cordoned off by Inspector Japp's men. Captain Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, clutched his notebook, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. "Poirot," Hastings murmured, keeping his voice low. "This place feels like a powder keg. The musicians are jumpy, and I don't blame them. A murderer among them. It's enough to make anyone's nerves fray." Poirot's moustache twitched, his gaze fixed on a young cellist who stood apart, her fingers twisting a rosette of sheet music. "Oui, mon ami. But in their nerves we find the truth. Fear, it loosens tongues, and today I intend to listen." He moved toward the cellist, his manner gentle but purposeful, like a maestro approaching a delicate passage. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of authority, "I am Hercule Poirot. You are, I believe, Mademoiselle Clara Henshaw, second cello?" The young woman started, her pale cheeks flushing as she nodded. Yes, sir. Clara Henshaw. I don't know anything, really. It's all so dreadful." Her voice trembled, and her eyes darted toward the pit where constables were still searching for the missing baton. Poirot smiled reassuringly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do not fear, mademoiselle. I seek only the smallest details, the notes that others overlook. Tell me, during the interval last night, did you see anything unusual? Someone near the pit, perhaps, or an action out of place?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening on the crumpled music. I was in the green room with the others, but I came back to the pit to fetch my rosin. It was just before the scream. I saw Mr. Grayson, Harold Grayson, the manager, near the pit entrance. He was holding something, a small glass bottle, like for medicine. I thought nothing of it at the time, but... Her voice trailed off, and she bit her lip, as if unsure whether to continue. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "A bottle, you say? Describe it, if you please." "It was small, dark glass, with a stopper," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was tucking it into his pocket, looking nervous. I thought he might be ill, but now, with the poison..." She shuddered, her eyes wide with sudden realization. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. And the baton? Did you see it in the maestro's hand, or elsewhere?" Clara shook her head. "I didn't see it. The maestro always held it, even during breaks. It was like part of him. After he fell, I didn't notice it. Everything was so chaotic." Poirot thanked her and moved on, his thoughts turning to the bottle Clara had described. Cyanide, he knew, could be stored in such a vessel, and Grayson's presence near the pit aligned with Maria Bellini's account of heavy footsteps. He turned to Hastings, who was scribbling furiously. "Mon ami, this bottle, it is a note in our symphony, a sharp one. We must learn more of Grayson's movements, and what this bottle contained." Their next encounter was with a trombonist, a burly man named Thomas Reed, whose ruddy face betrayed a mix of grief and indignation. Vivaldi was tough, but fair, Reed said, his voice gruff. He didn't deserve this. I was in the bar during the interval, but I heard something odd, someone arguing in the wings, low and heated. Couldn't make out the words, but it was near the pit. I figured it was Vivaldi and Maria again. She's got a temper, that one. Poirot's interest sharpened. An argument, monsieur. Did you recognize the voices? Reed shook his head. Not clearly. One was deep, maybe Vivaldi's, but the other could have been anyone. It stopped quick, and I didn't think much of it until the scream. Poirot filed this away, his mind weaving connections. An argument suggested confrontation, perhaps the moment the poison was administered, or the baton taken. He thanked Reed and moved through the hall, speaking to a flautist, a percussionist, and a clarinetist, each offering fragments of the evening's events. The flautist had seen Maria practicing in the rehearsal room, her music drifting through the corridors. The percussionist recalled Grayson bustling about backstage, always in a hurry, that man. The clarinetist, a nervous young man, mentioned a curious detail. Vivaldi had been unusually agitated before the performance, muttering about setting things right as he adjusted his score. This last piece echoed the letter fragment Poirot had found, and his little grey cells hummed with possibility. "Hastings," he said, drawing his friend aside, "we must learn more of this setting things right." Vivaldi was not a man to speak idly. He was preparing to act, and someone silenced him before he could. Their final interview was with the orchestra's librarian, a bespectacled woman named Mrs. Evelyn Porter, who managed the scores and schedules. She sat at a small table, her hands folded tightly, her face pale but composed. "Maestro Vivaldi was meticulous," she said in response to Poirot's gentle probing. "But lately he was distracted. Last week he asked me to fetch old financial records from the theatre's archives. Said he wanted to check something about the renovation funds. I thought it odd. He never cared about money before." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Financial records, madame. Did he say why?" Mrs. Porter shook her head. "Not exactly. He just said, 'There's something wrong, Evelyn, and I'll find it.' I gave him the ledgers, but he didn't share what he found. He was private like that." Poirot thanked her, his mind alight with the implications. The financial records, Grayson's nervous demeanor, the bottle Clara saw. The threads were tightening. He turned to Hastings, who was struggling to keep up with his notes. "Mon ami, we must see these ledgers. If Vivaldi suspected mismanagement, it may be the grave injustice he meant to expose. And Grayson, he is at the heart of it." As they left the rehearsal hall, Japp approached, his face grim. "Poirot, we've got something. One of my men found a scrap of cloth in the wings, near the table where Vivaldi's glass was. It's fine wool, like from an expensive suit. Could belong to Grayson, or someone else with access." Poirot's smile was faint but triumphant. "Excellent, Inspector. The cloth, it is another note in our melody. We must compare it to Grayson's attire and Wren's, and any others who wore such fabric. And the ledgers, can you secure them?" Japp nodded. "I'll have them by noon. But what about the baton? Still no sign, and it's driving me mad." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The baton. It is hidden with purpose, Inspector. It is not gone, but waiting. We shall find it. But first, we must follow the trail of money and motive." The symphony is building, and soon the crescendo will come. As they stepped into the corridor, the faint sound of a cello drifted from the rehearsal hall, a mournful note that seemed to echo Vivaldi's unfinished score. Poirot's mind, sharp and relentless, was already composing the next movement, determined to uncover the truth behind the silent symphony. Chapter 8. The hidden score, the administrative office of the Royal Lyceum Theatre, tucked away in a quiet corner of the building, was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the auditorium. Its walls were lined with dusty filing cabinets, and the air carried the musty scent of old paper and ink. A single window, streaked with the grime of London's fog, admitted a feeble light that fell upon a long table where Hercule Poirot stood, his gloved hands carefully turning the pages of a heavy ledger. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, peered over his shoulder, his face a mixture of curiosity and impatience. Inspector Japp, his broad frame filling the doorway, watched with a skeptical eye, his notebook open but idle. "Poirot," Japp said, his voice tinged with exasperation, "you've been at those ledgers for hours. If there's anything amiss, surely you'd have found it by now. My men are still combing the theatre for that blasted baton, and we're no closer to pinning this murder on anyone." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his concentration unbroken by Japp's impatience. "Patience, mon ami," he murmured, his eyes scanning the columns of figures with the precision of a musician reading a complex score. "The truth, it hides in the details, and the details, they are here, in these numbers. Money, Inspector, is the silent partner in many a crime, and I suspect it plays a leading role in ours." Hastings, flipping through a second ledger, sighed. "It's all Greek to me, Poirot. Payments for costumes, wages for stagehands, receipts for instruments. It looks perfectly ordinary. What are we looking for, exactly?" Poirot's finger paused on a line, his eyes narrowing. "We look for the discord, Hastings, the note that doesn't belong. Maestro Vivaldi, he requested these records, as Madame Porter told us. He suspected a grave injustice, something tied to the theatre's finances. And here," he tapped the page, his voice low but triumphant, "here is the first false note." Japp leaned forward, his skepticism giving way to curiosity. "What have you got, then?" Poirot pointed to a series of entries labelled "Miscellaneous Expenses." "These sums, Inspector, they are substantial, thousands of pounds over the past year, allocated to vague purposes, repairs, supplies, consulting fees. Yet there is no corresponding documentation. No invoices, no contracts. And see here, each entry is initialed by Monsieur Grayson." Hastings whistled softly. "Embezzlement, you think? Grayson's been skimming funds?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It is a possibility, mon ami. These amounts, they coincide with Vivaldi's demands for renovations, new seats for the pit, better lighting, finer instruments. If Grayson was diverting funds, Vivaldi's audit would have exposed him. A motive for murder, none?" Japp scribbled in his notebook, his face hardening. "That's damning, Poirot. I'll haul Grayson in for questioning again. But what about the baton? And the poison? How do they fit?" Poirot closed the ledger with a deliberate snap, his mind racing. "The poison, it is the method. Swift, silent, precise. The baton, it is the flourish, the distraction. I believe it was taken not for its value, but to mislead us, to suggest a theft or a personal vendetta. But where is it hidden? That we must discover." He turned to the filing cabinet, where a constable had delivered a box of Vivaldi's personal effects, retrieved from his dressing room, Poirot sifted through the contents: a silk scarf, a pocket watch, a bundle of letters tied with string. Among them was a notebook, its pages filled with Vivaldi's elegant script. Poirot opened it, scanning the entries, which detailed rehearsals, musical notes, and, toward the end, cryptic references to discrepancies and a need to act. One entry, dated a week before the murder, read, "The books are wrong. H.G. must be confronted. I cannot let this pass." Poirot's eyes narrowed. H.G., Harold Grayson, without doubt. Vivaldi was closing in, and Grayson knew it. This, mes amis, is the motive we sought. Hastings, peering at the notebook, frowned. But Poirot, if Grayson's our man, why the baton? Why not just poison Vivaldi and be done with it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The baton, Hastings, it is a symbol, but also a clue. Its absence draws our attention, makes us question. I suspect it is hidden close by, perhaps in this very theatre, where Grayson could ensure it remained undiscovered. We must search his office again. With care. Japp nodded, his jaw set. Right. I'll get a warrant to go through Grayson's papers properly. But I want to confront him now. That bottle Clara saw him with. It's too much of a coincidence. Poirot raised a hand, his tone cautionary. Not yet, Inspector. We must be certain. Grayson is clever, and a direct confrontation may cause him to destroy evidence. Let us first search, and then we shall play our hand. They returned to Grayson's office, now empty, the manager having been summoned to assist with the orchestra's schedule. The room was as Poirot had last seen it, tidy with its posters and polished desk, but now he approached it with a predator's focus. He examined the filing cabinet, its lock unyielding, and the desk drawers, which revealed only mundane correspondence. But beneath the desk, tucked into a narrow gap, he found a small, locked box, its surface scratched as if hastily concealed. "Mon ami," Poirot said, beckoning Hastings, "this box, it is out of place. We must open it." Japp, with a constable's assistance, forced the lock, revealing a bundle of receipts and a small ledger, separate from the official records. The entries mirrored the miscellaneous expenses in the theatre's books, but these were detailed: payments to fictitious suppliers, transfers to an account in Grayson's name. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The hidden score, Inspector. Grayson has been orchestrating his own symphony of theft." Hastings, flipping through the ledger, shook his head. "It's clever, Poirot. He buried the thefts in vague entries, knowing Vivaldi wouldn't notice, until he did. But where's the baton? If Grayson took it to throw us off, where's he hiding it?" Poirot's gaze drifted to the filing cabinet. "Inspector, may your men open this cabinet? I have a suspicion." With a crowbar, the constable pried open the cabinet, revealing rows of files, and, at the back, a long, narrow case wrapped in cloth. Poirot unwrapped it carefully, revealing the silver-tipped baton, its surface gleaming despite the dust. "Voilà," he murmured. "The missing note, hidden where only the guilty would think to conceal it." Japp's eyes widened. "Blimey, Poirot, you've done it. Grayson hid the baton to make it look like a theft. But we've got him now. Between this, the ledger, and Clara's bottle, he's cooked." Poirot's expression remained grave. "Perhaps, Inspector, but we must be cautious. The baton is found, the ledger incriminates, but the poison, its source, its administration, these we must confirm. Grayson will deny, and we need evidence that cannot be refuted." As they left the office, the baton carefully bagged by Japp's men, Poirot's mind was already turning to the next step. The financial discrepancies, the hidden baton, the bottle seen by Clara. They pointed to Grayson, but the symphony was not yet complete. The poison's origin, Wren's slippery alibi, Maria's passionate denials, all remained to be harmonized. Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes gleaming with determination. The truth, mes amis, it is close. We must play the next movement with precision, or the murderer may yet escape. The theatre, its corridors echoing with the faint hum of a distant violin, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Poirot to conduct the final notes of this deadly score. Chapter 9. The Critic's Mask. The fog that cloaked London had thickened by midday, casting a ghostly pall over the Royal Lyceum Theatre and its surrounding streets. Inside, the theatre's bar, where Hercule Poirot now stood, retained its amber glow, but the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of suspicion. The polished brass and mirrored shelves seemed to reflect not just light, but the undercurrents of deceit that ran through the case. Poirot, his small frame a picture of composure, adjusted his tie and surveyed the room with eyes that missed nothing. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood. Beside him, his notebook open, his expression a mix of anticipation and unease. Inspector Japp, his broad face set in a determined grimace, had just returned from overseeing the cataloguing of the newly discovered baton and ledger, his mood buoyed by the tangible progress, but tempered by the lingering gaps in the case. "Poirot," Japp said, his voice low to avoid the ears of lingering patrons. "That baton and ledger are solid, but we need more to nail Grayson. The bottle Clara saw, it's got to be the key to the poison. My men are searching his office again, but I want to hear what Wren has to say. That critic's got a tongue like a viper, and I don't trust him an inch." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Oui, Inspector. Monsieur Wren is a man of many words, but it is the silences between them that interest me. His hatred for Vivaldi was public, his movements elusive. Let us see if we can unmask the truth behind his scorn." They approached the corner table where Percival Wren sat, his gaunt figure hunched over a fresh glass of brandy, his notebook open to a page filled with sharp, angular script. His latest review, published that morning in the Clarion, lay folded beside him, its headline a stinging epitaph: "Vivaldi's Final Note, a Tragedy Foretold." Wren looked up as Poirot approached, his pale eyes narrowing, his sneer as sharp as ever. "Back again, Monsieur Poirot," he drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Have you tired of chasing shadows, or do you still think me a murderer?" Poirot took the seat opposite, his manner courteous but unyielding. "Monsieur Wren, I chase not shadows, but truths, and they are often hidden in the most unlikely places. Your review, it is provocative. You suggest Vivaldi's death was deserved, a consequence of his flaws. Such words, they invite questions about your feelings toward the maestro." Wren's sneer widened, and he leaned back, swirling his brandy. "Feelings? I'm a critic, not a sentimentalist. Vivaldi was a mediocrity who thought himself a genius. His death is a tragedy only in the sense that it robs me of further material to dissect. But murder, that's a step too far, even for me." Poirot's eyes gleamed, undeterred by Wren's bravado. "And yet, monsieur, your presence near the stage door during the interval, it is a curious detail. You say you sought air, a cigarette, the stars. But the usher, he reports you were gone longer than a cigarette requires, and your path took you close to the orchestra pit." Wren's hand paused, the brandy glass hovering near his lips. "The usher is mistaken," he said, his tone clipped. I was out for 5 minutes, no more. The alley was quiet, the fog thick. I smoked, I returned. If you're implying I slipped into the pit to poison Vivaldi, you're wasting your time. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. I imply nothing, monsieur. I observe, and I observe that you know the theatre's layout well, too well, perhaps, for a man banned from rehearsals. The pit entrance, the wings, the table where Vivaldi's glass stood. These are not mysteries to you, are they? Wren's sneer faltered, and for a moment his eyes flickered with something. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. I've reviewed performances here for years, he said, recovering his composure. I know the Lyceum like the back of my hand. Every critic does. It doesn't make me a killer. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Let us speak of the baton, then. The silver-tipped heirloom, so dear to Vivaldi. You dismissed it as a trinket, yet its absence is central to this crime. Have you any thoughts on where it might be? Wren laughed, a harsh, grating sound that drew a glance from a nearby waiter. If I were to guess, I'd say it's in some pawnshop by now, or melted down for its silver. But you found it, haven't you? As the gossip's already spreading, hidden in Grayson's office, of all places. His eyes gleamed with malice. That manager's got more to hide than I do. Poirot's smile was faint, but sharp. You are well informed, monsieur. Yes, the baton was found, concealed in a filing cabinet. But gossip, it travels faster than truth, and I am interested in facts. Tell me, during your sojourn in the alley, did you see anyone else? Monsieur Grayson, perhaps, or Mademoiselle Bellini? Wren's fingers tightened on his glass, and he took a slow sip before answering. I saw no one. The fog was thick, the alley empty. But I'll tell you this. Grayson's been jumpy for weeks. I saw him last month, arguing with Vivaldi in the foyer after a performance. Something about funds, budgets. Vivaldi was waving a ledger, red in the face. Grayson looked like he'd been caught stealing biscuits. Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the consistency with the financial discrepancies he'd uncovered. And Mademoiselle Bellini. You mentioned her practice, her fire. Did you see her near the pit, perhaps, or hear anything unusual? Wren shrugged, his sneer returning. I told you. I heard her violin from the corridor. Relentless, like a storm. She was in the rehearsal room, or so she claims. But she's got motive, hasn't she? Vivaldi humiliated her, and she's not one to forgive easily. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Motive, monsieur, is but one note in the symphony. Opportunity and means, they are equally important. Let me ask you this. Did Vivaldi ever speak to you of a secret, a betrayal he intended to expose? Wren's expression darkened, and he set his glass down with a clink. He was always blathering about something, injustices, truths. At that gala I mentioned, he hinted at some grand revelation, but he was half in his cups, and I didn't care to listen. If he had a secret, he took it to his grave. Poirot rose, his manner polite, but his eyes cold. Merci, Monsieur Wren. Your words, they are illuminating, though perhaps not in the way you intend. Remain in the theatre, if you please. The truth, it is like a curtain. It will rise when the time is right. As Wren returned to his notebook, his pen scratching with renewed vigour, Poirot led Hastings and Japp to a quiet alcove near the bar's entrance. Hastings, his face flushed with excitement, whispered, Poirot, he's slippery as ever, But did you catch that look when you mentioned the baton? He knew it was found before we said a word. How's he getting this information?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Monsieur Wren, he is a man who listens, Hastings. Critics, they thrive on whispers, and the theatre is full of them. But his knowledge, it suggests he is closer to the crime than he admits. His alibi, it is weak. The alley, the fog, they are convenient excuses. We must verify his movements with the usher, and we must learn more of this argument between Grayson and Vivaldi." Japp nodded, his notebook open. "I'll check the usher's story again. And I'm bringing Grayson in for a proper grilling. That ledger and baton are enough to hold him, but we need the poison to seal it. Any ideas where that bottle might be?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The bottle, Inspector. It is the final note. If it held cyanide, it will bear traces, and Grayson will not have discarded it carelessly. Search his personal effects, his home, even the theatre's refuse. The murderer. He is cunning, but not infallible." As they left the bar, the faint clink of Wren's glass lingered behind them, a solitary sound in the growing cacophony of clues. The theatre, its corridors alive with shadows, seemed to pulse with secrets, and Poirot, his little grey cells alight, was determined to unmask the killer before the final curtain fell. Chapter 10. The Violinist's Secret. The rehearsal room of the Royal Lyceum Theatre, with its bare walls and faint echoes of music past, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot entered, his polished shoes clicking softly on the worn floorboards. The morning's fog had begun to lift, but a chill lingered in the air, as if the theatre itself mourned Maestro Enrico Vivaldi. Captain Hastings followed, his notebook clutched tightly, his honest face etched with the strain of the unfolding mystery. Inspector Japp, his broad frame bustling with purpose, had remained in the administrative office, overseeing the cataloguing of Harold Grayson's incriminating ledger and the silver-tipped baton. But he had granted Poirot leave to pursue further interviews. The little Belgian's mind, sharp as a conductor's baton, was piecing together the discordant notes of the case, and Maria Bellini, the fiery first violinist, was the next to face his scrutiny. Maria sat near a battered piano, her Stradivarius resting on a velvet cloth, its polished wood catching the dim light of a gas lamp. Her dark hair was loose now, framing a face that bore the marks of sleeplessness, shadows under her eyes, a tightness in her jaw. Yet her posture was defiant, her hands steady as they folded a scarf, their movements precise, almost musical. Poirot noted this, recalling her skill with the violin, the dexterity that could wield a bow, or perhaps something more sinister. "Mademoiselle Bellini," Poirot began, his voice gentle, but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "We meet again, and I sense you carry a burden beyond the grief of losing your maestro. You have been candid about your anger with Vivaldi, your humiliation. But there is more, n'est-ce pas? A deeper connection, perhaps, that you have not yet shared." Maria's eyes met his, and for a moment they held a flicker of something. Fear, or perhaps resolve. "What do you mean, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice low, her Italian accent softening the edges of her words. "I've told you everything. Vivaldi was hard on me, yes, but I respected him. I was practicing here during the interval, as I said." Poirot stepped closer, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze unwavering. "Respect, mademoiselle. It is a complex melody, often intertwined with love, or even pain. You spoke of Vivaldi's criticism. But there is a history between you. Oui, a bond that goes beyond conductor and violinist. Maria's hands stilled, the scarf slipping from her fingers to the floor. She bent to retrieve it, a movement that gave her a moment to compose herself. But Poirot saw the tremor in her fingers, the slight flush in her cheeks. "You're very perceptive," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, there was a history. Vivaldi. He was my mentor when I was young, in Milan. I was 16, a prodigy, they said, but raw. He took me under his wing, taught me to channel my passion into precision. He was like a father to me, until—" She paused, her eyes glistening. "Until," Poirot prompted, his tone soft but insistent, like a musician coaxing a delicate note. Maria took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the violin. "Until I came to London, 3 years ago. I joined the Lyceum, and he was different, colder, more demanding. He said I'd grown complacent, that I'd lost my fire. We argued, often. I felt betrayed, as if he'd turned against the girl he once nurtured. But I still admired him, even when I hated him." Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, glanced up, his eyes wide. "Good heavens, Poirot, that's motive enough, isn't it? A father figure who turns harsh. It's personal, not just professional." Poirot's moustache twitched, but he kept his focus on Maria. "Mademoiselle, this betrayal you felt, it was deep, oui? And yet you stayed. You played for him. Why?" Maria's eyes flashed, a spark of her earlier defiance returning. "Because I am an artist, Monsieur Poirot. Music is my life, and Vivaldi, for all his faults, was the best conductor I've ever known. I stayed to prove myself, to show him I was still the prodigy he trained." Poirot nodded, his mind turning to the night of the murder. "Let us return to the interval, mademoiselle. You were here, practicing, you say, but you heard footsteps, heavy ones, you told us, and now we learn from others that an argument was heard in the wings, near the pit. Did you hear voices, perhaps, or anything that might suggest who was there?" Maria frowned, her brow furrowing as she recalled the moment. "I was focused on my music, but yes, I heard something. A low murmur, like two people trying to keep quiet. I couldn't make out the words, but one voice was deep, like Vivaldi's, and the other. I thought it was Grayson. I saw him earlier that day, arguing with Vivaldi in the foyer. It was about money, I think. Vivaldi was angry, waving a paper, saying something about misused funds. I didn't stay to listen." Poirot's eyes gleamed, the connection to the ledger and Vivaldi's notebook snapping into place. "This argument, mademoiselle, it is significant. And the baton, did you see it after the interval began? Or perhaps you noticed someone near Vivaldi's glass in the wings?" Maria shook her head, her expression earnest. "No, I swear it. I was here, playing. The baton was in his hand when he left the podium. I saw it, shining under the lights. After that, I didn't see it. Or the glass. I only came to the pit when I heard the scream." Poirot stepped back, his gaze softening, but his mind razor-sharp. "One final question, mademoiselle. Vivaldi. He spoke to you of a betrayal, a secret he meant to expose. Did he ever hint at what it was, or who it involved?" Maria's lips parted, and for a moment she seemed to wrestle with her answer. "He didn't say much, but a few days ago, after rehearsal, he took me aside. He said he'd found something wrong in the theatre, something that would shock everyone. He looked worried, not angry. I asked him what it was, but he just shook his head and said, 'Not yet, Maria. Soon.' I thought he was being dramatic, as he sometimes was." Poirot's smile was faint, but knowing. Merci, mademoiselle. You have given me much to consider. Remain in the theatre, if you please. The truth, it is near, and I shall need your presence when it is revealed." As Maria gathered her violin and left, her footsteps echoing in the corridor, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low with excitement. "Poirot, that's a bombshell. Vivaldi was her mentor, almost a father, and then he turned on her. That's motive, plain as day, and she's got the hands for it. Slipping poison into a glass or snatching a baton would be child's play for her." Poirot's eyes twinkled, but his expression remained grave. "Motive, oui, Hastings, but motive alone does not make a murderer. Mademoiselle Bellini's grief, it is real, and her story of the argument aligns with what we know of Grayson. Her hands, they are skilled, but are they guilty? We must test her words against the evidence." Japp rejoined them, his face flushed from his efforts in the office. "Poirot, we've got something else. My men found a vial in the theatre's refuse bins, behind the stage door. Dark glass, like Clara described, with traces of a white powder inside. I've sent it to the lab to test for cyanide. If it matches, we've got Grayson dead to rights." Poirot's moustache twitched, his mind racing. "Excellent, Inspector. The vial, it is the missing note. If it held cyanide, it ties Grayson to the poison. But we must be certain of its origin, and we must confirm the argument Maria overheard. The symphony is nearing its climax, mes amis, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall conduct it to its end." As they left the rehearsal room, the faint strains of a violin lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of Maria's passion and pain. The theatre, its shadows deepening, seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the truth, waiting for Poirot to play its final chords. Chapter 11. The Final Movement. The auditorium of the Royal Lyceum Theatre, so recently a stage for Tchaikovsky's soaring melodies, was now a silent arena of judgment. The velvet curtains hung heavy, their crimson folds absorbing the faint light of the chandeliers, which had been dimmed to a sombre glow. Hercule Poirot stood centre stage, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space as surely as any maestro. His polished shoes gleamed, his moustache was perfectly symmetrical, and his eyes, sharp as a conductor's baton, surveyed the gathered suspects with a quiet intensity. Captain Hastings stood to his left, his notebook tucked away, his honest face taut with anticipation. Inspector Japp, to his right, clutched a file of evidence, his broad shoulders squared for the confrontation to come. Before them, seated in the front row of the stalls, were the three suspects: Maria Bellini, her dark eyes glistening with a mixture of defiance and dread; Harold Grayson, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, his smile replaced by a nervous grimace; and Percival Wren, his gaunt frame slouched with an air of disdain, though his pale eyes darted restlessly. The orchestra pit, still cordoned off by Japp's men, loomed behind Poirot like a silent witness to the crime. The air was thick with tension, as if the theatre itself awaited the resolution of its tragic score. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, carrying the authority of truth, "we are gathered to unravel the mystery of Maestro Enrico Vivaldi's death, a murder most foul, committed in this very theatre, under the guise of music and passion. The poison, the missing baton, the whispered betrayals, they are the notes of a symphony, and I, Hercule Poirot, shall conduct its final movement." He paced the stage, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over the suspects. "Let us begin with the crime. Maestro Vivaldi was poisoned with cyanide administered in his water glass during the interval between 8:45 and 9 p.m. The poison was swift, silent, and precise, requiring knowledge of the maestro's habits and access to his glass in the wings. The silver-tipped baton, his cherished heirloom, was taken not for its value, but to mislead. And a letter fragment found near his body spoke of a grave injustice he meant to expose. These are the chords of our mystery, and each of you plays a part." He turned first to Maria Bellini, whose hands gripped the arms of her seat. "Mademoiselle Bellini, you are a woman of fire and talent, a violinist whose passion is matched only by your pride. Vivaldi, your mentor, became your critic, humiliating you before the orchestra. You admitted to a deep bond, a fatherly connection that turned bitter. Your presence in the rehearsal room during the interval gave you opportunity, and your skilled hands could have slipped poison into a glass or a baton from a pocket. Yet your grief, it is genuine, and your story of hearing footsteps, heavy, like those of a man, points elsewhere. I believe you did not kill, but you know more than you have said." Maria's eyes widened, her lips parting in protest, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. He turned to Percival Wren, whose sneer flickered, but held. "Monsieur Wren, your pen is a weapon, and your hatred for Vivaldi was no secret. Your reviews were venomous, your ban from rehearsals a wound to your pride. You were seen near the stage door during the interval, claiming a need for air. Yet your knowledge of the theatre's layout and your quick awareness of the baton's discovery suggest you are closer to the crime than you admit. But your motive, it is one of ego, not of desperation. You did not kill, though your words may have fanned the flames." Wren's sneer deepened, but he remained silent, his fingers tapping his notebook. Poirot's gaze settled on Harold Grayson, whose face had paled to a sickly hue. "Monsieur Grayson, you are the manager, the keeper of the theatre's lifeblood, its finances. The ledgers, they tell a tale of deceit. Thousands of pounds siphoned into miscellaneous expenses, payments to fictitious suppliers, transfers to your own accounts. Vivaldi, he discovered this, did he not? His request for the financial records, his talk of a grave injustice, it threatened to expose your embezzlement. You had motive, opportunity, and access. The bottle seen by Mademoiselle Henshaw, the vial found in the refuse, the baton hidden in your office. These are the notes of your guilt." Grayson leapt to his feet, his voice shaking. "This is preposterous. I managed the theatre, yes, but I didn't kill him. The baton. Anyone could have hidden it there. And the vial. I know nothing of it." Poirot's eyes gleamed, unyielding. "No, monsieur. The vial, it contained traces of cyanide, confirmed by the laboratory this morning. It was found where you discarded it behind the stage door after you poisoned Vivaldi's glass during the interval. You were seen near the pit, agitated, by both Mademoiselle Henshaw and Monsieur Wren. The argument overheard by Monsieur Reed. It was you and Vivaldi, was it not? He confronted you about the missing funds, and you acted to silence him." Grayson's hands trembled, his eyes darting to the exits. "You have no proof. The vial could belong to anyone. And the baton. I was framed." Poirot stepped forward, his voice a crescendo. "The proof, it is in the details, monsieur. The ledger in your hidden box, initialed by you. The baton, concealed in your filing cabinet, where only you had access. The vial, discarded where you thought it would not be found. And the letter fragment in Vivaldi's hand, accusing H.G. of betrayal. You poisoned him to protect your theft, and you took the baton to suggest a robbery, to muddy the waters. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through the fog. Grayson collapsed into his seat, his face crumpling as the weight of the evidence crushed his façade. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he stammered, his voice breaking. Vivaldi was going to ruin me. He found the discrepancies, demanded I explain. I panicked. The cyanide was from a cleaning supply, easy to get. I slipped it into his glass, just a moment's work. The baton. I hid it to make it look like a theft. I thought it would throw you off. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. Harold Grayson, you're under arrest for the murder of Enrico Vivaldi. As the constables led Grayson away, his sobs echoed in the silent auditorium. Maria rose, her eyes brimming with tears, and Wren, for once, set aside his notebook, his sneer replaced by a grim nod. Poirot turned to them, his expression softening. The symphony is complete, mes amis. The truth, it is always revealed, though it may cost us dearly. As the suspects dispersed, the theatre seemed to exhale, its shadows lighter now that the killer was unmasked. Poirot adjusted his hat, his little grey cells at rest, but only for a moment, for the next mystery was never far away. Chapter 12. The Coda, the Royal Lyceum. Theatre stood silent under the weight of a London evening, its grand façade softened by the last tendrils of fog that curled through the gaslit streets. The auditorium, emptied of its audience and suspects, was a cavern of shadows, the velvet seats absorbing the faint echoes of the day's revelations. Hercule Poirot stood alone on the stage, his small, immaculate figure dwarfed by the towering proscenium arch. His hands were clasped behind his back, his moustache perfectly aligned, and his eyes, though weary, gleamed with the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved. The silver-tipped baton now returned to the evidence box. The incriminating ledger and the vial of cyanide had woven the final threads of the tapestry, revealing Harold Grayson as the murderer of Maestro Enrico Vivaldi. Yet, for Poirot, the case was not merely closed, it was a symphony concluded, its final notes lingering in the air. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, had retired to the Savoy Hotel to pen a letter to his wife, leaving Poirot to reflect in solitude. Inspector Japp, his task complete, had escorted Grayson to Scotland Yard, where the manager's confession would be formalized. The theatre, now free of the murderer's shadow, seemed to breathe again, but Poirot felt the weight of its secrets still, the human passions that had crescendoed into tragedy. He stepped to the edge of the stage, his gaze drifting to the orchestra pit, where Vivaldi's body had lain just hours before. The scattered music sheets had been gathered, the podium righted, but the memory of the maestro's final grimace remained vivid in Poirot's mind. "The symphony of human nature," he murmured, his voice soft in the vast emptiness. "It is never without its discords. Greed, pride, betrayal, they play their parts, and we must listen to their melody." Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspects, each a note in the deadly score. Maria Bellini, with her fiery passion and wounded heart, had been a suspect of intensity, her mentor's betrayal cutting deep. Yet her grief, her dedication to her music, had rung true, and her testimony of the footsteps had pointed to Grayson's guilt. Percival Wren, the venomous critic, had wielded his pen like a dagger, his hatred for Vivaldi a public spectacle. But his role, Poirot now saw, was that of a provocateur, not a killer. His alibi, though weak, held under scrutiny, and his malice lacked the precision of poison. Grayson, the smiling manager, had been the true discordant note, his embezzlement a secret Vivaldi had uncovered, his panic leading to a desperate act of murder. Poirot paced the stage, his mind replaying the clues. The cyanide in the water glass, slipped in during the chaos of the interval. The baton, hidden in Grayson's office to suggest a theft. The ledger, with its damning entries, and the vial, discarded in the refuse, its traces of poison, the final proof. Each had been a deliberate choice, a note in Grayson's attempt to orchestrate a perfect crime. But, as Poirot knew, perfection was an illusion, and the little grey cells could unravel even the most cunning composition. He paused at the podium, his fingers brushing its polished surface, imagining Vivaldi's commanding presence. "You, mon ami," he said softly, as if addressing the maestro's spirit, "you sought to expose the truth, and it cost you your life. But the truth, it cannot be silenced forever." The letter fragment, with its talk of a grave injustice, had been Vivaldi's final act of defiance, a note that had guided Poirot to the heart of the crime. The theatre's silence was broken by a faint sound, a creak from the wings where a stagehand was adjusting a rope. Poirot smiled, the ordinary sound grounding him in the present. He adjusted his hat, his movements precise, and descended from the stage, his footsteps echoing in the empty auditorium. The case was closed, but the world, he knew, was full of mysteries waiting to be solved, each a new symphony for his little grey cells to conduct. As he stepped into the foggy street, the lights of the Lyceum dimmed behind him, a final curtain falling on the silent symphony. Poirot's silhouette vanished into the night, a solitary figure in pursuit of the next melody of truth,